With me now is the Treasurer of New South Wales, Mike Baird. Treasurer, welcome. In increasing state mining royalties in this budget, I take it you and Premier O'Farrell now disagree with Tony Abbott's view that any further tax impost on the mining industry will be a catastrophe for the sector and the Australian economy.
Well, no, that's not right, Quentin. I mean, in relation to the way we've structured this, it is structured to have no impact on the mining community. It is very clearly the only lever that we have available to us to actually recoup money that Canberra has ripped out of us.
I know you've got your reasons, but they said that the state mining royalties are inefficient. They're not levied on the profits. You know, the mining companies have got to pay it whether they make a profit or not.
No, but I think the point on this is, Quentin, is that we are in a position where we have asked Canberra for a considerable period, the Premier and myself, through various mediums, to come and talk to us about the impact on the state budget of the carbon tax. Very simple. And the estimates are about $1 billion over the forward period. And what we're saying is that is unacceptable to stand by and to let Canberra take that sort of hit to our schools, to our infrastructure here in New South Wales, at the same time as they're giving compensation to Victoria. Now, they haven't explained that, why they give money to Victoria and not to us.
You feel you've been contemptuously treated by Wayne Swan and Julia Gillard?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I've spent time in...
They haven't answered your queries? They haven't answered Barry O'Farrell's questions or letters?
We have asked directly on a number of occasions to engage with them on the impacts of this and to talk about the compensation to this state. And I think that is the obligation of any state government.
This is negotiable, is it?
We are very open. I mean, the negotiation table remains open with both Barry O'Farrell and myself to talk to Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan. We want to understand how are they going to compensate households in this state, and we also want them to justify why they're putting compensation into Victoria, which means that up to $800 million is going out to some of the owners of the generator, being the French government. So how does the French government get $800 million and New South Wales gets none? I mean, that's just not fair.
Why enter these predictable party political hostilities with Canberra when you are trying to persuade the federal government to lift their infrastructure spend in this state, because as Standard & Poor's, your taskmaster, makes clear in their assessment this afternoon, you cannot deliver what's needed on your own?
No, they have said that it is a challenge, and it is a challenge. We're not underestimating the challenge that we're facing. And the reality, we have said, we want to talk to Canberra about these issues. Now, if they don't engage and they make a decision not to engage, well, what do? Do we stand by and just sort of roll over? No, we are not going to do that. We've stood up and we've said, on the behalf of New South Wales, this is the mechanism that actually gets the money back to us, and then we're happy to talk to them.
The budget's in deficit under you, 11-12 for the first time in years. Your capital works spend remains about the same, even with the changed priorities, North West Rail, for example. Do you concede that you are limited in delivering what you are elected to do, infrastructure like heavy rail, sooner rather than later?
Well, I think what we saw today is the first revelation that the presentation of the finances in this state had not been honest. We had seen, if you had taken out the federal stimulus money over the last 2 or 3 years, you would see that in effect we were basically running operating deficits. Now
we're in surplus last year, Treasurer.
Well, not if you take out the surplus money that was directed in there. And remember, from a public accounts point of view, the surplus money from the money from Canberra for housing and education under the federal stimulus comes in direct as a grant to New South Wales, but spent as capital. So it doesn't impact the underlying operating result. And that's really the point. And from a rating agency point of view, they do look at the underlying result. And we have been in deficit, and we were left with $5.2 billion of deficits going forward. So the challenge was immense.
We're still in standoff with Infrastructure Australia over Parramatta to Epping Rail. You won't put up the $500 million needed to unlock this $2 billion project. Wesrock says we need both, but party politics trumps public interest, does it not?
No, I mean, it doesn't, Quentin. That's
$500 million.
That's one of the things that we have done in this state, which I think you will mark in the years ahead. I mean, governments come and go, but our hope is that one of the legacies we will leave behind is Infrastructure New South Wales. Infrastructure New South Wales is about going through and prioritising infrastructure projects on the basis of merit. Now,
but we know the cost of North West is massive, and there is no federal help, as we've discussed. You've got a project that is ready to go now, but you won't go there.
But what we want to do with all projects is going forward is to actually look at their ongoing, how they fit within the priorities of the state. That's what Infrastructure New South Wales is.
If Tony Abbott becomes the Prime Minister, will he deliver for New South Wales?
Well, I'm sure he would. You know, I'm sure that Tony
Well,
Abbott
if you put it on him because the federal situation, the federal politics is very brittle at the moment. Anything could happen.
Well, it will, Quentin, and I think that what we are saying, and we're very happy to say it to the federal Labor government as well as to the federal opposition, we think that New South Wales deserves its fair share of infrastructure funding. If you look at the last 3 or 4 years, we haven't had that. And I think that Canberra at the moment, and Wayne Swan in particular, needs to explain to the people of New South Wales why we haven't got our fair share, why he's providing compensation on the carbon tax down to Victoria and not to New South Wales. And, you know, I think they are very fair questions that need to be answered.
Privatisations are on the cards now. The long lease of the Kurnell desalination plant and now Port Botany announced today. You say you can get $3 to $4 billion from these leaseback deals, but you're committing consumers to paying for expensive desal water they may not even need. And what's the downside to the cost of freight through Port Botany if this monopoly facility is privatised?
Well, I think we've been innovative, Quentin, in terms of the challenges we face. So the first thing you have to do is to get your expenses under control. We've done that. Then you have the capacity to fund your infrastructure, and we've done that to a certain level. There are
compromises in these privatisation deals, are there not?
Well, I don't think there are. I mean, I think that what we are doing is saying we have these assets sitting on the balance sheet. We can either leave that $4 billion sitting there, or we could free it up and put it to work in the infrastructure that everyone is talking about needing. So in the budget today, the improvement you've seen in those ratios is excluding that up to $4 billion on these assets. So we think that gives us the flexibility.
And we haven't put in the liabilities about the privatisation system that are still being inquired into in the electricity industry. Yep. In the time available, on the AAA credit rating, you heard Ross Gittins there say, well, why didn't you have the courage, or imply, why didn't you have the courage to take us down a peg or two in the AAA, because this was a serious opportunity for you to get the amount of money we desperately need and the voters want you to do to spend on infrastructure.
Well, I think that one of the great things about this budget is that it is sensible and that there is a record infrastructure spend. We have got a $62.6 billion.
Standard & Poor's says it remains broadly at the level of the previous budget due to reprioritisation. So I know you click it up a bit, it does look like a record, but it really is part of the ordinary capital works program of New South Wales.
But then we have the up to $4 billion coming from the desal and the port to come and fill that gap, which is a significant step forward for a range of infrastructure projects. And, you know, that is a critical way that we are going to deal with it. Now, I would say, I agree with most things that Ross Gittins says, but I think at this stage, to lose our AAA credit rating, if you look at what happened in markets overnight, and you saw what happened in the US a few weeks ago, to lose confidence at this point in time, I think would be perilous.
Treasurer, thanks very much.
Thanks, Quentin.